So thank you for the invitation, Laura. So I will present one third part of the talk. So before starting, I will present the course. Course is not an island, but also in-area team. So course is an acronym for Compiler Optimization and Runtime System. So in the team, we have three research directions. The first one concerns the compiler analysis. So for example, people working on this topic can analyze the source code, for example, for the loop, and take some information to the runtime. And the idea is to be able to have collaboration between compiler and runtime. So for example, they are able to evaluate by analyzing the code the complexity in terms of memory accesses. So it's I/O, but okay. The second topic concerns the runtime system. So we discussed, for example, on OpenMP and the runtime between the compiler and the runtime. So some topic we work on load balancing because many applications are not balanced. So we have to provide some new strategy on memory management. This morning, Jack said that memory is a big problem. So we speak in this talk about memory management and also scheduling and load balancing directed by power. And the last topic concerns the debugging and property monitoring. For example, if you develop an application with OpenMP or something like that, we develop some new approach for debugging to help and to understand the program structure and everything. So the team, we have 6 permanent research members. 3 are here, so Frédéric, François, and myself. So the 2 first work on compiler. For example, they work on loop transformation, register allocation for the processor. They also work on intermediate representation to represent the program and to analyze and optimize. So François, for example, is working on OpenMP, so he will speak about OpenMP and mainly memory management during this talk. Fred work on parallel algorithm, scheduling, but he will speak about OpenCL mainly. And so I will present some idea on runtime system, low power consumption, and load balancing. So the agenda, we have 3 parts. The first one, I will introduce parallel computing and architecture evolution. So I will use some idea present this morning to explain the difficulty, for example, for the memory, the cache, and something like that. I will also explain on the HPC system the software stack we need to develop parallel application. And I will also speak about the Mont Blanc project. Mont Blanc is using ARM processor, and we also work on a project in this school. The name is Bulldog project. Yeah. François will speak about multi-core programming, mainly OpenMP, loop parallelism, fork-join parallelism, also task. Task is a very important concept we see this morning with Jack. And Fred will speak mainly about heterogeneous programming. So we can use CPU and GPU at the same time with OpenCL. And he will present the main concept of OpenCL in the last part of the talk. So some slides, I asked some people to use some slides. For example, Arnaud Legrand, Henri Casanova from Hawaii. People from Barcelona give me some slides. I will show you this slide in this talk. Intel, and also I will also acknowledge Laura and all people working for this school. It's very nice. So it's the first time we give this talk, this course, so feel free to ask questions and also to provide feedback about the course, because, yeah, I hope you enjoy. So a short introduction of parallel computing. So the idea is to use multiple processor or core in parallel to solve problem more quickly than with a single processor or core. So it exists different parallel machines. So CMP, so it's a chip multiprocessor. It contains multiple processors called cores, we see this morning. Shared memory, so you put several processors in the machine, and you have a shared memory. So it's a shared memory, for example, SMP is the name for symmetric multiprocessing. François discussed about, for example, NUMA SMP machine, and what are the difficulties and the issue for programming this kind of platform. In this course, we don't discuss about cluster and grid, it's not the topic. We mainly focus on CMP and SMP machine. So the idea is to improve the performance. It's why we execute in parallel. So we want to run faster, I will say. The idea also, when a vendor, for example, Intel, IBM, AMD, ARM, comes out with a new chip, to be able to port the application without modification. We hope, but sometimes we are obliged to modify because we have some new feature. Yeah. So perhaps you know the 3P key challenge in terms of performance. We need to scale from 1 to several thousand of cores. So the number of cores is a new megahertz. So when you see, for example, the top 500, you see the number of cores. The grid parameter now. Before it was megahertz, but now it's... Power efficiency is also very important, especially if we target exascale platform. So this morning we can see the kind of... And the programming challenging, so in this course, we mainly discuss about the programming challenging and mainly how to provide a converged solution in a standard programming environment for multi-core and mini-core. So now we have two kind of platform, but now we see that the programming environment converge in the same way. So I will discuss mainly about hardware and architecture. So I give some detail about the processor and what are the issues for performance mainly. So during 20 years, I think, vendor and ARM, Intel, and everywhere try to improve the thread performance on one core by scaling, by using the scaling theory. So we see this morning the talk of Jack. And so they put extra transistor in the chip to improve the microarchitecture of processor. For example, they introduce a pipeline in the processor. It's very important to have pipeline. So the idea of pipeline is to, for one cycle of the processor, you have to be able to execute one instruction. So the idea is to subdivide the instruction in multiple stages. For example, here I divide with 4 stages. For example, in the processor now, it may be 10 or 11. But 4 is very... so the first stage, for example, is to feed the instruction and decode. So the name is DF. After the read the data, so you take the value from the register and you put in the unit, the computing unit of the processor. You execute, and after you have to write back the result, mainly in the register, because, for example, for RISC processor, all computations are done with register. So you can see, for example, here a pipeline of 4 level of pipeline. You can see, for example, with 7 instructions, you are be able to execute in 10 cycles. If you don't have a pipeline, the 7 instructions are executed sequentially, and so it takes 28 cycles. Yeah. So, but the pipeline, so it's a very good idea, but in many code, it's difficult to fill the pipeline because, for example, you have some control dependence between instructions. For example, if you have a branch at the low-level instruction, the processor doesn't know, for example, if you have a condition, if the result is yes or not, is true or not, or false. So the processor, for example, integrates prediction for the branch to improve the usage of the pipeline. So you have also a problem of data dependence. You have two instructions, and the two instructions have some data in common. For example, you can see here the x variable is a compute with a formula, and after you compute y, but you have to have the result of x. And so if the two instruction is sequentially, you have to wait the result for y. So now, this morning you see that the clock rate is not it's difficult because you increase the power dissipation. It's difficult also to increase the instruction per cycle because one evaluation is also for some code. This morning Jack speak about that. The number of instructions per cycle or the number of floating point instructions is not enough to evaluate the performance. Yeah. And so on the processor, you have several, we see this morning, you have the general purpose processor, you have some accelerator, GPU, something like that. And you have also a vectoral unit in the processor. And so it's very important to exploit very well this architecture. So now the idea is not to have a compiler or some tools to parallelize automatically the code, but now we ask to the programmer to help to extract the parallelism, to give the parallelism. So we can see this kind of problem. So I can show shortly. So this morning also Jack showed why in 2004, when the vendor go to multi-core. So it's a slide coming from Intel. So they try to justify why we need multi-core. So you can see, for example, a processor with at max frequency, you have the power and the performance. So, sorry, if you underclock the processor, for example, for 20%, the performance is increased for 13%, but the energy is 73%. So they also try to, if you try to underclock the clock of your machine, you can see with 20%, the power is divided by 2, and the performance around 13%. So the idea is to put on the same chip two core with lower clock, and to be able to have, for example, in this case, 73% of performance with the equivalent power consumption. So after that, Intel continued to develop this kind of processor. So we, for example, it's an NeRLM with 6 core. And so the important thing to see is that you have cache in the processor. So in this slide, you can see you have shared cache, but you have also private cache. And so we discuss about the problem of the cache after on this part. And so for one core, you can see the different components you have. So, for example, for one core, you have several execution units for floating point, for integer, for everything. And so you have also things for the cache. You have L1, L2, because in the processor now you have 3 levels of cache, L1, L2 private, and L3. You have also branch prediction to help to have a good pipeline with many instructions in current execution. So it's so this morning also Jack introduced the Chinese processor coming from the Chinese company for the first machine. So in France we don't have this kind of processor, but we have a many-core processor developed by Calray. Calray is a French company coming from ST. So they try mainly to target embedded platform, But it's very interesting to study this kind of platform for HPC. So in my team, we work on this platform for compilation, for runtime. And so the architecture is different from the processor we saw this morning, because we have 256 core, but now here it's organized around 16 clusters. And you have memory, share memory. So sorry, you can see you have shared 2 megabytes of memory shared by 16 cores. And you have a NOC for the communication between the cluster. So the core shares 2 megabytes of memory. So inside the core, you don't have any cache coherence. So cache coherence is very useful for the programmer, but now in this case, you have some complexity to develop application, because you have to program the coherency. And you have also a network on chip. So it's difficult. For example, I show you seismic application code. So you have around 2 gigabytes of data, for example. And you have to make some tiling, two-level tiling, to be able to send the data to the memory of the cluster. And you have to split in 2 dimensions. And you have also to have some overlap. You send, for example, a tile during the communication. The cluster compute another tile, another communication. So it's interesting to see the performance. So, for example, MPPA, you can see, is very competitive in terms of energy compared to Xeon or, for example, NVIDIA GPU. But in terms of performance, you have less performance. But mainly interesting to have the same code and to be able to see the ratio between performance and power. So I think it's very interesting. And so last month they come with a new chip, it's a 64 chip. And so I think it may be an accelerator, for example, for ARM, for this kind of platform. So now I will describe the memory hierarchy. This morning, Jack told that the memory is difficult because you have a memory wall. The memory wall is you have the memory bandwidth, and the core are not able to have quickly data, and so they wait, they stale, so it's difficult. Yeah. So you can see the hierarchy in terms of memory. So you have register, level 1, and level 2, and level 3. So you can see the speed and the cost of the different components. The cache is very expensive also in terms of transistor, in terms of power. So this morning you can see that the Chinese processor does not have too much cache, because cache is expensive in terms of transistors, in terms of power. So you can see also the latency. The latency is different in terms of well, we are on the register in the level 1 cache, so this morning we can see this kind of difficulty. So you know, shortly I will introduce the way how the data go to the memory with the different level of the memory. So when the CPU, for example, a RISC processor, asks to data in one instruction, if the data is not in register, you have to request the data from memory and register. Yeah. And so data in register come only from the L1 cache, because you have several levels of cache. So when the CPU requests data from memory, L1 cache take over. If the data is L1 cache, you return data to the CPU. If the data is not in cache, it's a cache miss. Cache miss and cache hit are very important when you evaluate a code to see exactly the global behavior of your program. So you have the same way for the different level of cache. And after, another possibility is the data is not on the memory. For example, if you have out-of-memory application, so you have to interact with the operating system. because you have, for example, to take data from the disk, from the virtual memory. The page is not in the memory, the page is on the disk. You have to retrieve the page from the disk and to put in the memory, so it's a very long time. So it's very important to have this notion of, when you develop one application, to know the size of your cache. So for example, this morning, Jack showed you, he tried to get the good size of the vector to put in the size of his processor. Yeah. And so after, the cache miss is very costly. So cache miss degrades performance. So because the CPU, the core is idle and waits for another cache line or something like that. So you have to try to increase the cache it rates. So it will give a better performance, higher performance. So to increase the cache hit, so the good way is to access to the memory sequentially, because the processor integrates some prefetching components. So if you access one part of your data, the processor anticipates and puts the part after in your cache. So you have also to avoid stride access in the loop. For example, you can see, so for sometimes it's difficult for the processor to prefetch the data in the cache. And also in some code, you have some indirect addressing. You don't access directly to the array, but you have some indirection saying exactly what index you will access in the code. So you can see the free. And so the better way to use the cache is mainly to have sequential access in your data, in your vector. So another thing you can see on the processor, you have, for example, on Intel or some other processor, you have private and shared cache, or shared cache. So the advantage of private cache is that the cache are closer to the core, so you have faster access. So you reduce the contention, because if you have several cores accessing to the same memories, you have contention. And you have also slower execution, mainly when you have some hyper-threading, so I will discuss after. The advantage of shared cache is if you have a thread on different core, you can share the data between the different core, the different threads of your application. And you have also more cache space data if a single sequential program run on your processor, you have a big cache. So it may be interesting to have a shared cache. So we speak about, so if you have some private cache in the processor, you can see the architecture. So for example, here you have 4 cores, and you have, for each core, you have one or more level of cache, L1 and L2. You can also have a shared cache and the main memory. So the problem is how to keep the data consistent across the different caches. So for example, you have a variable x in memory, and the first core read the x variable in the memory, so the variable will be in its private cache. After the second core read also the same variable. But after the core 1 writes a new value for x. So it modifies its local cache. It's also modifies, in this case, the main memory, because you have a write-through cache writing for the memory. So when the core 2 attempts to read the x variable, so you have a stale copy of the variable. And so you have to deal a solution for this case. So in this talk, I will present mainly the invalidation-based protocol with snooping. I will introduce the ID. The ID, internal the multi-core chip, you have a bus intercore, which allows the communication between core and the different core. This bus will be used, for example, for snooping. Snooping means that all the core are monitoring the bus to see what are the variables which are modified. So in validation, if a core writes to a data item, all other copies of this data item will be invalidated. Snooping is also very expensive in terms of power, because you have something like a mechanism monitoring the bus, so it consumes some power. So you can see this example. So as soon as the processor, the core 1 modifies the X value, you have some invalidation request sent on the bus, and so the core 2 can invalidate the copy of X. It's very simple. Yeah. So after invalidation, only the core 1 has the value of the X. So all these mechanisms are very easy to understand, but in terms of hardware, it's very expensive, because you have to put many transistors. It's very expensive. And so, for example, we discussed about MPPA. On MPPA, they decide to not implement any cache coherence, because it's too much costly. So, okay. So there are also an alternative of the invalidated protocol is the update protocol. The idea is not to invalidate the value in the core, but mainly to update directly the value. So after the modification, the two core have the good value for the X variable. Yeah. So cache miss, and yeah, it's you have several sources of cache miss. So you can see here, the first one at the beginning of your application, the cache is empty, so you have to fill the cache. So you have a necessary cache misses at the beginning. It's called also cold start misses. You have also some cache misses due to the capacity of your cache. So you manipulate many data. The cache is too small. And so when the cache is too small, so the processor gets some cache line, some data, and to replace. And perhaps the replace block the processor take is not good, because you access later, so it's not a good idea. But everything is automatic, so you cannot do anything on the cache. The content of the cache is mainly managed by the processor. You can have some idea the data you have put in your cache, but you do not directly access to the content. Also, you have a problem of conflict misses, especially if when you are a multi-core processor. Different core can access to different data, and so you have some competition, for example, to access to. And you have also the coherence misses. So you see in the previous slide, the processor decides to replace data, and perhaps the decision is not good, so it's mainly a difficulty. So it's mainly to explain the difficulty of cache and the cost also of cache. Yeah. Do you have questions? Perhaps you have questions. No, okay. So mainly the hardware performance bottleneck come at different levels of the architecture. So the first one on the core, mainly the cache misses. Another performance bottleneck is the activity of cores. So this morning you can see with Jack several diagrams showing the activity of core. And so it's very important in terms of performance to have all the core busy during the application, because you lose in terms of performance scalability if you're not. So the vector unit, so you have on the core, for example, SSE, MMX, AVX, several. So the compiler can vectorize your code, but in some cases, the compiler cannot do the work. So sometimes you are able to use some intrinsic, because intrinsic you can explicitly use the vectorial unique. On Intel processor, you have also the concept of hyper-threading. The idea is on one core to be able to execute two kernel threads. So they share the computing resource of the core, and you duplicate only the register. So you have a copy of the register, the hardware register. And for each set of registers, you have one thread, and the threads are in competition to the computing unit. So the idea, for example, if you have two threads running on one core, the idea is to be able to separate the work of the two hardware threads, for example, if you have one thread computing in integer, so you will use integer unit, and the other compute in double precision, floating point or double precision. So the idea is to improve the multi-core and to be able to have a better usage of computing unit of the core. So the memory is also a problem. So for example, you will see with François. François will present you SMP machine with a NUMA platform. And so the problem is mainly when you have several cores accessing to the memory will become a bottleneck. So we have this problem. You have also the problem of placement of the data if you have a NUMA machine. So it's mainly some problem coming from the architecture. If you don't understand the problem, so you have to explore the different possibility of bottleneck performance. So memory, you can see, is many performance bottleneck come from data movement. This morning also Jack speak about. So you have to optimize. So you have several, mainly free optimization to do with locality. You have some things like temporal locality. So you try to reuse the data you put, for example, in the cache. So, for example, you see this morning, Jack show you, for example, for the dot product, you compute the dot product. After the vector are put in the cache, but you don't use the cache after, so it's very costly. For example, in matrix, you put the matrix in the cache, and for example, for the B matrix, you use the matrix, the data several times. So you reuse, so you have something like a temporal locality. Spatial locality is mainly the same idea, but when you access data, the idea is that the data nearby to this data will be used after, so mainly in terms of the data stored in memory. And also, you have to take an account the processor locality, because the processor locality, you have several cores, they share a resource, for example, the cache. And you have also to avoid some false sharing. So, for example, the cache, the unit managed by the cache is a cache line. If you have two data in the same cache line, they can be used by two cores, and you have some ping-pong effect between the two caches, so it's very bad. Yeah. So after discussing software hardware evolution, so now I will introduce software stack and many basic concepts to use efficiently the multi-core architecture. So for programming multi-core, you can use several concepts. For example, you can use process. Process are the operating system abstraction coming from Unix. So for example, you create process with fork, so it's classical. But you have also the concept of kernel thread. Kernel thread is also a kernel, an operating system abstraction, which allow you to have, for a process, several activities running inside the process. So you have something like a multi-parameter process. And you have also the concept of task. So, for example, this morning, Jack presented some DAG task for application. So it's a concept of task. So the task may be very big. So you have tasks with OpenMP, StarPU, OnePSS, Quark. Quark is a... And so I will present on the architecture the different... so the idea is mainly to spread the computing workload across the different core and processor to write parallel. And so another thing is that the operating system will map process and thread on processor and core, and we'll discuss about that. So you can see here, for example, a 4-core machine. So on this machine, you can see 3 Unix processes. The first one uses these 2 cores, and the 2 others use these 2 cores. So you have the concept of processes at the low level. Just on top, you have the kernel thread. The kernel threads are mapped to one process. So, for example, this process has 3 kernel threads. This one, 2 kernel threads. This one, and you have also the name is task, but you have also other programming environments. They name fiber, object, something like that. Yeah. And so you can see also the task level. So it may be represented by a simple list, but we can see other. So task, what is the task? Stack is very efficient in terms of memory because you have also to memorize the stack pointer and register. So for each task, you have one stack, the register. So the operating system does not know anything about tasks. Tasks are completely managed by the kernel thread. So it means that you do not have many interactions with the operating system. Because when you call the operating system, you have a OS system call. It's very costly in terms of cycle, for example, because you have to switch the context of the processor. And so the task is very interesting because you do not interact with the operating system. The good idea is also to have a non-preemptible task. It means that the task starts and computes until the end. It's not a good idea to have some blocking system call, for example, to read data in a task. Task is mainly for computing. It's not interesting to read data in task because the task is blocked. And when a task is blocked, for example, here, the kernel thread here is also blocked. And so it means that this task cannot be executed because this one is blocked. So when you have a system call with blocking, it blocks all the tasks in the same kernel thread. So if we compare task and kernel thread, so the overhead for task creation is in scheduling is very lower because you don't interact with the operating system. Creating a task is mainly to call a function in the runtime. It's different to call the operating system. So it's the lightweight object. So you can yield or you don't have any interrupt because you have some problem. So blocking system call block all the tasks scheduled on the hardware thread or on the kernel thread. And so it's mainly hard to schedule when you have something like a dynamic platform, when you add some cores or processors. So it's mainly working on a static configuration. So 2 slides explaining how the scheduling of tasks is working. So you have mainly 2 kinds of approach. The first one is based on a central queue. So this central queue is here. It contains all the tasks that can be executed by the core. So when a kernel thread appends a new task, it will be added to this queue. It's a global queue, we work in shared memory. When you have idle thread, it means that a thread has completed one task, so you need to have some work. So it takes work from the global queue. So so it's very simple to implement and to understand. So we need sometimes some optimization. So you can understand if you have a many core. So with 2 cores, it's very simple. But if you have one other core, you have some contention to access to the central queue. So you need to have some mutex for the synchronization. So some optimization consists to take not only when you are idle, to take several tasks to put and to execute, not only one. And you have also optimization of the implementation of central queue by using LIFO, last in, first out. So the producer and the consumer on this structure does not operate at the same way, at the same side of the queue. So you do not need any synchronization in this case. And you have also a second approach based on something like the name is work stealing. So you steal the work of other threads. For example, here you can see you have 2 cores. Each core has a local queue for containing task. So when a thread appends a new task, it will happen in the local queue. When idle thread pick a task, it will pick in the local queue. If the local queue is empty, it is still a task from another queue for a remote queue. So this approach involves less communication and synchronization with, and so you have also better locality, because if you push the task in your local queue, you have much chance to have some locality for the access for the cache, for example. Yeah. Also, we have also the problem of assigning a kernel thread to the core. So you can see on this slide, the question is, when you create a new kernel thread, on which core the thread will be executed? So the problem of assigning a kernel thread to the core. So each process and kernel in Unix has an affinity mask. An affinity mask, you specify what core the kernel thread is allowed to run on. So different threads can have different masks, and affinity are inherited from the process with the fork. So for example, you can see here an affinity mask for a 4-way multi-core processor without hyperthreading. So you have a mask with 4 bits. One signifies you can say, okay, this kernel thread can run on the core number 0. It cannot be executed on the core 1. It can execute on the core 3 and the core 2. So for one thread on one process, for your affinity mask, you need to have one in the affinity mask. Okay, so we get all in. So by default, the affinity mask is all 1. So all the kernel thread can run on all the core, and the operating system scheduler can decide what thread run on what core. And the scheduler can use some data, execution data for the thread to decide exactly the good core. So in this way, you have possibly the possibility to migrate thread and kernel. It means that a thread can change the core because the operating system scheduler decides. But it's not very good to migrate because, for example, if you compute on one core. So you have your cache with your data. If you migrate, you lose the cache because the content of the cache at the start is not transferred to the remote processor. So the operating system scheduler can try to avoid the migration as much as possible. It's time to keep a thread on one core. This is called also soft affinity. The programmer can modify the mask affinity of thread. For example, there is a system call, the name is sched set affinity. So you can see you specify your number, your name, and you have also the mask I showed before, you can give to the operating system. And so in the context of HPC, generally, we try to have for one thread, one in the affinity mask. And so it's interesting because you are sure that the thread will not migrate. Okay, so yes, I am time. 5 minutes? Yeah, okay. So this morning we discussed shortly about Mont Blanc project. So the idea of Mont Blanc project, 10 minutes? Okay. The main idea of Mont Blanc project is mainly to use the ARM processor. The ARM processor are the processor coming from your phone. And to see, is it possible to build an HPC cluster with this kind of architecture? So this project starts in 2011. Now it's not finished. It starts with FP7 and H2020. And so the idea of the European Commission is to develop an open exascale approach, because now the player has mainly from US, China, Japan, and Europe has also something to say and to play. So the idea is mainly to base the HPC platform for exascale on ARM processors, which are very energy efficient, because your phone you can stay 2 days without using power, so it's interesting. And so you can also see that on this side we show the different level of performance comparing, for example, two architectures, NVIDIA Tegra 3 and Tegra 4 in terms of performance compared, for example, to Intel processor. You can see the ratio in terms of performance. For example, it's 10 for between the Tegra 4 and Intel Sandy Bridge, I think, yeah, Sandy Bridge. And you have also the cost, because the processor, a mobile processor is very cheap. It's only $20 compared to $1,000 for the last version of the processor. And so at the beginning of the project, we study several architectures in terms of, so we study NVIDIA Tegra 2 and 3 based on ARM Cortex M9, and also with a new platform built by Samsung Exynos 5 with Cortex A15, and also. So I will discuss after. So the idea of the Mont Blanc project is to develop a prototype, a real prototype with not a petaflop, but mainly a teraflop architecture, and also to deploy the full HP system software in terms of compiler, tools, everything, to be able to have the same environment as a classical platform. The second objective is also to design a future generation of HPC system, for example, based on a 3D architecture for memory. So it's mainly the second, mainly a topic for architects working on hardware to see the performance of the prototype and to design new features for new architecture. And the last one is on the prototype to be able to port and optimize a small number of representative exascale applications. So the applications are mostly developed in Fortran. So we have to try to compile this program on an iPhone processor, for example. And so we have worked on the compiler, on everything, so I will discuss about that. Yeah. So after the 3 years of the project, so we develop a prototype. So you can see a classic prototype. You can see so it's based on Exynos 5 compute card with 2 Cortex A15. We have also a GPU. It's not NVIDIA because ARM developed its own GPU. It's a Mali GPU. This GPU is only programmable with OpenCL. So most of the code of the Exascale have some GPU, but mainly in NVIDIA. So during the project, we have to port many applications developed in CUDA, in OpenCL. It's one reason also we have a part of this talk on OpenCL, because I think it's important. In the context of embedded platform, many players, for example, Nokia, Ericsson, use OpenCL for the programming of application on embedded. So, we have a small compute card of this processor, so it's mainly efficient in terms of power, so you have 2.1 gigaflop per watt. So we put several cards in a blade. So we put 15 compute nodes in the blade, so we have 425 gigaflops with some. So you can see we don't have the same power efficiency as on the compute card. So we also put the blade in the chassis. So we have a rack. So you can see here the power efficiency of this platform in terms at the beginning of the project and at the end of the project, Mont Blanc 1. And you can compare with the best power efficiency platform in the green, like 500. So this prototype will be present at Supercomputing in November. It will be selected as the best paper. As the Chinese, you have Chinese for Gordon Bell. No, it's not for Gordon Bell, but for best paper of supercomputing. So we hope. Yeah. So I will show you also some evaluated kernel and comparison with other processors. So you can see all the kernels are developed with pthread. Pthread is mainly kernel thread. You have OpenMP. OMPSS is a runtime environment developed at Barcelona, CUDA, and also OpenCL. And so you can see different kernels. So after we compare this kernel with Tegra 3, Tegra 2, Handel is, and also compare to Intel processor. So you can see the difference in terms of performance. It's a ratio between 3 and 1 in terms of performance. It's an average of several. And so you have also in terms of power efficiency, we modify the frequency of the core, and you have the energy consumed by the different kernels. And you can see that the choice made by Mont Blanc 1 is mainly Ardell, so Exynos 5 card. So you have the different level of. And so it's a proof of concept, mainly to show that ARM is a good candidate. So this morning, you remember, Jack said that ARM, Japan Bank acquired ARM during the last week. And also the Japan K computer, after because now it's based on Spark, will be based on ARM. So it's a good thing. So concerning the software stack, so we develop a complete stack. So at the low level, we have a Ubuntu system, so it's a Linux system with some constraints. We develop also the cluster management to book to be able to book the node on the cluster. We have also MPI, so we choose MPI CH developed at Argonne. Also Nanos is a runtime developed at Barcelona. We also port performance analysis, Paraver from Barcelona and Scalaska for Ulrich. several scientific libraries will be ported on this platform. The compiler also, GCC and GFortran, because, and we have also a compiler developed at Barcelona for OMPSS. So you have something very similar that you can have on a classical cluster on Trace. Okay, it's the end of my talk.